the proximity contextual category that I select, is that a valid point? Are those significant enough that I should be studying on, or shall I change the topic? So I look at cartographic scale, number of located object, location, size of reference object, and general cartographic design. And basically did several different designs and compare the different factors. For example, this one is because the scale is different. You can see this one is finer grained, and this one is sort of zoomed out. But the location of these points are sort of on the paper very similar. Similarly, this is comparing the cartographic design. You get the gist. So did 20 different designs and different combination, so that I can use, for example, two. For example, in this case, 1 and 2 cartography design the same, location difference, but their scales different. So I can select a different comparison to make sure to do a direct comparison of one contextual factor, while the other remain in control. Basically, one experiment, one control. And pilot finding is, in short, scale, location, number of located object matters more than cartography design and size of reference object or proximity in a map reading scenario. And here is a rating from the participant. So this is you can view it as a behavioral study for the same topic as a first venture into the study. So let's take a look at the method. Let's view this as an arsenal of tools that we can adopt to attack the challenges such as geo-disambiguation, such as geo-referencing, and as well as data collection, how to reduce the noise of web document. And so this is the arsenal. How can we put these pieces together to build a comprehensive data collection system that works for my need? So if you look at the workflow here, the target that we want is the proximity triplet corpus as well as the contextual factors, right? And how we do it, we generate a number of PD, proximity term, a reference object, and use a query generator to generate search engine result, and scrape all that result and put that in a scraped raw online document corpus, and do the RO and LO extraction, as well as geocoding to get the signal that we want, get the sort of spatial entity, named entity recognition tool, and then we construct the spatial proximity triplet, and then we also go use the Google Map API, also a scraping, web scraping kind of methodology to extract the distances, as well as all the other factors such as listing type. These are very hard. I did an aggregation which I'll cover. Geography, where does this LEP located at, and as well as demographic. So what does context mean in this corpus study? Listing type. So this is, I'll use the correct list. Here are all the different listing types, and here is I think New York City is where the location is, or where you can basically change the URL to go into another location, as well as RO type, which I basically aggregated. So let's take a look at the output. Oh, by the way, so the corpus was basically generated in relatively long period of time because we have iterations on the scraping method. How we actually scrape, we try to use zip code, we try to use different method, and at the same time, there's also anti-scraping limits from search engines, which we'll have to conform to. So that makes the collection a bit long, but the outcome of after those iterations, the outcome can be replicated relatively quickly. So dividing the output document in terms of PT, RO type, listing type, and region, you can see like how many documents have near, how many documents have food. This is the RO type that I categorized into, and number of documents by listing types. How many of them fall into different categories? And here's what a document that we store looks like. RO type is department store, latitude, longitude, what is the PT, what is the RO, as well as there's a source link to the file. And you can actually see the Google Map link where here the reference object and located object sort of is reversed in order for us to find which series is the one that we're referring to. I'm going to cover this in discussion. This is one of the sort of drawback because our hypothesis is that the nearest, for example, here there's McDonald's. We consider the nearest McDonald's as what the original describer was using as reference object, which may or may not be true. Overall, we have 20 plus, 2,000 plus web document. This was shrunk down from over 10,000 documents. There's a lot of classification as well as throwing the outliers away. Spatial coverage is all over the United States, covering different proximity analysis result. So we look at each contextual factors separately, as well as interacting with each other. But the interacting with each other part is not, for the interest of time, I will not cover. So this is for proximity terms. As you can see, adjacent to, the semantic meaning is very close. That also is reflected by the distance. And comparing, take a look at whether it is statistically significant. If it's true, it means they are quite different. If it's false, that means you cannot say statistically they are different against each other. And I'm using Kruskal-Wallis method to avoid it's a non-parametric test. So in this case, adjacent to and close to are quite different from each other, and close to and next to are quite different from each other, near and next to are different from each other. But you can't make the same statement about adjacent to and next to. Look at RO types. Except landscape versus stadium, all the other are quite different from each other. And similarly for listing type, except for sale and jobs. For sale versus real estate, job versus real estate are quite different from each other. And this is for the region. So in this case, except Midwest and Northeast and Southeast versus West, all the others are quite different against each other. So in this case, one could say, these factors do matter in a sense that they have a different spatial distance implication when you're using these different factors. And so this is basically a very rudimentary way. It's not really a system as complicated as I hoped it would be. But if you look at these, you could basically given this proximity term, given a listing type, given RL type, and given region, you can take a look at what's the median and what's the 25 percentile, what's the 75 percentile, which gives you a range. And you can basically take estimate of what's the distance criteria that you can potentially adopt to answer the original research question of doing spatial language interpretation. That's what SLI stands for. Spatial language interpretation or generation system to generate more humanly readable spatial descriptions. On discussion, obviously all our data are subject to population density. More dense population there is. So this is a general rule, which I'll actually talk about in one of my software patents for industry applications at Twitter. After that, there's also the other limitations that we still face when dealing with web documentation. There's a lot of, when we say UGC, user-generated content, it's have a lot of noise. We basically see that in the final corpus size, right? So I initially was imagining the corpus would be at least 50 or even 100,000 of document, but eventually we only get to a small but valid. That's the most important part. A small but valid corpus. That is due to the noise, the amount of UGC noise. Potentially, there's a smaller than 1% kind of ratio of the document from the very first scrape to imagine a funnel of how much document actually goes into the final corpus. Due to those, you could say as scraping schema being too broad, but also could be due to UGC noise. The user-reported LO located object precision may not be correct, and also they may also be placing the listing into a different category. These errors all happen, and this is coming from after I personally manually examined those documents, finding those caveats. I also georeferencing, as I described before, the nearest Starbucks may not be the reference object, and but in this case that's the best guess because the original describer didn't specify which Starbucks he was referring to. But there could be other implications. There's also, we are relying on Google Maps on using the distance metrics. So Google Maps, as far as I understand, give sort of a summarized distance. If it's in miles, it will say 0.2 miles. It didn't give you the exact meter. So the sort of precision of that distance is already at a higher level when the distance is far. We're subject to that kind of precision round off, as well as if Google is actually considering travel time, which is another distance measure that Alan actually proposed in the 90s. So going forward, looking a little bit, we could potentially use the same web scraping methods to compare, doing bilingual comparison. But the tricky part is that you actually need to collect data that are comparable. And in this case, real estate, while overseas buyers coming to the United States actually buying real estate, spurs a lot of web documents on these. You have native speakers writing these descriptions, and you also have native Chinese speakers writing, these are clearly not translated, machine translated. These are actually written by the Chinese realtor, and these comparisons can be made by crawling the same description. And also, we could potentially enhance the data set with more attributes. That described before, linking Facebook, linking Twitter, because our data are public now. So you can potentially get gender, get age, those description, and also potentially how long have you lived at that place, and take an inference. I believe there's a study on using behavioral study to understand what these human factors. Are you familiar with the region? How does that impact the proximity understanding? As well as this is more interesting. Using machine learning and also as well as other signals to basically guess what you actually want to evaluate those factors. In this case, you can also guess age. So this is used by ads targeting. They could potentially guess how old you are by looking at your tweets, and that goes into on using that, there will be privacy concerns. Industry has been focusing on the privacy concern. For example, if you actually extract those data, you only store those for 60 seconds online, and then it's completely wiped out as a way of protecting. There's no way to trace it back to the original poster, but you can still get the summarized result. And towards a better HCI, that's another forward-looking thing. Originally, I was thinking that this would be more for human understanding of spatial proximity, but right now with more machines, self-driving cars, whether or not that's valid or necessary becomes another question. So let's talk about a little bit of the fun part, industry application. How we actually can use the similar understanding that I get or implications that we learned from this in the industry. So for Twitter's use case, it is very key, as I already described, for ad targeting. So Twitter doesn't really have a need. It's not providing you route directions, but it really wants to understand where you come from, who you are, so that you can better target ads. For example, if you are close to a Dunkin' Donut, it can target either ads for Dunkin' Donut or for a competitor, say Burger King. And versus if you are in some other countries, that may not even make sense, right? So how do we actually do this? I'll also cover this in more detail. Basically, we use a spatial index called hierarchical spatial index called geohash. The longer the geohash is, the more fine-grained it is. So you can see it divides the whole world into 4 by 8 cells. And this is D, this is what D stands for. And DR stands for a smaller cell. As the string gets longer, the cell gets smaller. And you can potentially build a tri structure like this. And instead of having a pointing polygon check, you can basically do a tri lookup to get, am I in SF or am I in New York City? However, the problem is the tri will be, if you just have an arbitrarily set tri depth of the tree, the problem is that you will either be too coarse or the tri will be too big. How can you trim the tree becomes the question. And here I had a software patent calling that dynamic spatial indexing. Basically, initially we thought using population density, but then we thought, well, Twitter, why do we need population density? We are population density. So we just aggregate the query count based on a particular cell, And if it's past a certain threshold, we can do dynamic division, but we in this case just did a simple arbitrarily set division. And for the cells that are more dense, go deeper, and for the cells that are less dense, set at a certain threshold, and for the cells that are even less dense, set a higher threshold. So there's that.
So did you check the assumption that you made that Twitter use corresponds to population density?
In this case, actually, it no longer matters because we are developing this not for population use case. We are developing this for Twitter's use case. We want to make so population density. If we actually use population density, it may not serve our purpose better. So using the Twitter's query actually serve our purpose better. We don't really, if there are more dense population that they are not using Twitter, we don't need to do a more
and
dense.
that's why Twitter's in so much trouble, because they don't care about all the people that don't use them.
Twitter's trouble. This is recording, so I should better stop. I can talk to you about Twitter's trouble. That's I can assure you, technology is the least of its trouble. It's product and vision and politics. And so going into Uber.
I mean, just very, very briefly, it would be really, really straightforward to just test the assumption, right? So you just take the population density that you get from the census or somewhere else and just check it against.
The tricky part is that Twitter is global. That we actually look into population density global dataset. That there's not one dataset that have the same level of precision across the globe. At least.
Right, but you can do it just for the US or whatever part you have.
But Twitter is global,
validation.
right? Oh yeah, sure. Yes, that's true. That's very true. Yeah. And going back to Uber, I want to mention